Now that we've figured out how long it'll take us to get somewhere or how fast we need to go to get there, now we'll talk about PIM, position of intended movement. This helps us to figure out while we're actually doing the voyage whether or not we're going to show up on time, early, or late. And if you are following along in our job sheet, it's job sheet 2 TAC 5 TAC 2 in our trainee guide. And this is problem number 3. So for all of our PIM problems, we will always give you certain information. In this case, we'll let you know which way you're traveling. So for question 3, you're traveling west along an approved PIM track. And we'll also always give you the speed, PIM speed. That is your speed of advance, not the speed that you have ordered up, but the speed that you planned your voyage at. So it's speed of advance. We'll also give you what time you took your fix at, in this case 2200 Zulu or GMT, and what time the waypoint is that you're going to. We'll also give you how far away from that waypoint you are. So in this case, you are 7.3 minutes east of your designated waypoint. I'll ask you if you are ahead or behind PIM, then also how far ahead or behind PIM you are, and we expect you to be within plus or minus 2 minutes. We want you to be exact. After that, we will ask you, okay, so now that you figure out how far ahead or behind with PIM you are, what do you need to do to get back on PIM? So what speed do you need to order up in order to be back on PIM by a certain time? And we expect you to be within plus or minus 2 knots. So that's a mini speed required problem. Let's jump into this problem. Number 3. I always like to start by drawing out our waypoints so that we can get a visual representation of where we are and where we're going. So here are our 2 waypoints. Here's our track. We're going to get those waypoints from our move rep, and they will not only have positions but exact times as well. And we are transiting west. Our PIM speed, our SOA is 14.2 knots, and at 2200 Zulu, we take a fix, and we figure out that we are 7.3 nautical miles east of our designated 2200 waypoint. So I'm going to draw the fix, and since we're transiting west, the DR is going west. There's our 2200 Zulu fix, and we figure out that we're 7.3 nautical miles east of our designated 2200 Zulu waypoint. So we'll make the waypoint over here, we'll make that our 2200 Zulu waypoint. One of the reasons we like drawing this out is because now we can see that, okay, at 2200 we are here, but we need to be here. So that's the answer to part A. We are behind PIM because we're not where we are supposed to be. On to part B, we need to do some time, speed, distance to figure out how far behind PIM we are. So we know this distance from the fix to the waypoint is 7.3 nautical miles. So now we have to figure out how long it's going to take us to get from our 2200 Zulu fix to our 2200 Zulu waypoint. I always like to start by drawing our time, speed, distance triangle, distance on top, and then speed and time on the bottom. And we know our distance, 7.3 nautical miles. We also know our speed, because it's our PIM speed, 14.2 knots. We're looking for time. So we'll treat it like a fraction. We'll take our distance and divide by our speed. So let's do 7.3 nautical miles divided by 14.2 knots. Plug it into our calculator, and we get 0.51. Now for units, let's take a look. Remember that knots are nautical miles per hour. So now the nautical miles will cancel out, and we'll be left with just hours. Now we're not going to tell our CO that we're 0.51 hours behind PIM. We need to convert that into hours and minutes. So we'll take 0.51 hours, and we'll multiply it by 60, because there are 60 minutes in every hour. Plug it into our calculator, and we get 30.8 minutes. So that's the answer to part B. We are 30.8 minutes behind PIM. Now as soon as you tell your CO, sir, ma'am, we're about 31 minutes behind PIM, the next question that we can expect is, all right, Nav, ANAV, what do we need to do to get back on PIM? And that's the question that we're looking for in Charlie. So part C is that what speed is required to get us back on PIM by a certain waypoint? Your CO says, all right, I want to be back on PIM, so 0 minutes ahead or behind, by 0800 GMT. So let's draw our waypoints again and the track between them. The middle one is our 2200 Zulu waypoint. That's the one that we were going towards. Our next one will be our 0800 Zulu waypoint, and you'll probably have other waypoints in between there, but we want to make it a little difficult so that you learn, so we're going to make it, you have to be back on PIM by your 0800 Zulu waypoint. Our fix was somewhere to the east of our 2200 Zulu waypoint, and as always, let's draw our time, speed, distance triangle. And let's see which variables we know. We know our distance, although we need to do a little math to figure out the exact distance. From the problem, we were told that our PIM speed is 14.2 knots, which means we planned, in the planning phase of our journey, we planned to go 14.2 nautical miles every hour. So that means that from 2200 to 0800, we plan to go 14.2 knots the entire time. There's a difference of 10 hours between these two waypoints. And if we go 14.2 knots the entire time, then the distance will be 142 nautical miles. So for 10 hours straight, we planned on going 14.2 knots. You multiply them because of our time, speed, distance triangle. And in 10 hours, we will have gone 142 nautical miles. So that's part of our distance. That's this distance. From our 2200 Zulu waypoint to our 0800 Zulu waypoint. But we're not at our 2200 Zulu waypoint. We're over here. So we need to add in the distance from us to that 2200 Zulu waypoint. It was given in the problem, 7.3 nautical miles east. So we have to add this number and this number to get the total distance we need to go. Use our calculator, and we take 142 nautical miles and add 7.3 nautical miles, and we get 149.3 nautical miles. That's our distance. We'll clean our drawing up a little bit. There we go. Now we need to find what our time is. In this problem, currently 2200, we need to be back on PIM by 0800. So the time between those two, between our fix and that waypoint, is 10 hours. And if you really want to, you can figure out the time by going to a waypoint you already passed. But for consistency, we teach that you'll always go to the next waypoint ahead of you. And that way, your time will never be negative. It will always be positive. So we have 10 hours to go 149.3 nautical miles. Look at our time, speed, distance triangle. Distance is on top of time. So we'll take our distance and divide it by our time. 149.3 nautical miles divided by 10 hours equals 14.93 knots. And let's sanity check that. We were a little bit behind of our last waypoint. We were about 31 minutes behind PIM. Our PIM speed of 14.2. In order to regain, we would need to do a little bit more than our PIM speed of 14.2, which, yep, makes sense, 14.93. As far as rounding goes, you can keep this at 14.93, and that can be your answer. If you want to round, do not round down. If anything, round up to the nearest tenth. So if you wanted to round it, you could round this, so that would 0.93 round up to the next number, that would be 15.0 knots. Again, you never want to be late, so we'll definitely accept 14.93 knots, but if you want to round up. And that's the answer to question Charlie. If you feel like you've mastered this, feel free to get out of this video, but for everyone else, let's go to the next slide, and I want to show you something that is a common error that we see when calculating PIM. Let's modify that last problem a little bit so that it's a little more challenging. That last one's pretty easy because the time of your fix was the exact same time as your waypoint, and that will only rarely happen in the real world. So let's modify this a little bit. We'll change your designated waypoint. We'll make it your 2000 Zulu waypoint. So let's draw it out. And don't worry, this doesn't need to be to scale. We'll make the middle one your 2200 Zulu, your 2000 Zulu waypoint. Everything else in the problem will remain the same. You'll still be 7.3 nautical miles east of your 2000 Zulu waypoint, which will put you over here. That fixed time is still 2200 Zulu, and you're still transiting to the west. Now, just looking at this, it's very difficult since these two numbers our different times, we need to do an extra step. We need to take our position here and figure out what time we will arrive here, and then compare those two times, not these two times. So we'll do our time, speed, distance again. We know our distance is 7.3 nautical miles, and our speed is still our PIM speed, 14.2 knots. Take a look at our time, speed, distance triangle. We have speed and we have distance, so we'll take our distance divided by speed to get our time. We'll punch that in our calculator, 7.3 nautical miles divided by 14.2, and we get 0.51 hours, the same number we got in our last example. However, the difference here is that since our fixed time and our waypoint time are two different numbers, this is telling us that it'll take us 0.51 hours to get from here to our waypoint. Let's convert 0.51 hours into minutes. So we'll multiply 0.51 hours times 60 minutes in every hour, and we get 30.8 minutes. So that's telling us it'll take around, we'll call it 30.8 minutes. It'll take us 30.8 minutes to get from here to here. We have to do a little addition. So we'll take the time of our fix, 2200 Zulu. We'll add 30.8 minutes. And let's see what we get. 2230.8 Zulu. That's what time will actually arrive at this waypoint. Now we can compare apples and apples. We'll actually be there at 2230.8 Zulu, but we were supposed to be there at 2000 Zulu. So we'll find the difference in time from when we were supposed to be there, 2000 Zulu, to when we actually got there, 2230.8 Zulu. Do a little subtraction, and we get 8 minus 0 is 8. 0 minus 0 is 0, 3 minus 0 is 3, 2 minus 0 is 2, 2 minus 2 is 0. So that's a difference of 2 hours and 30.8 minutes. And we were supposed to be there at 2000. We actually got there at 2230, so we're late. So in this example, the answer is 2 hours and 30.8 minutes behind PIM because we're late. This is a more complicated problem than what we saw in the example, but we wanted to show you because these are the ones that you're going to see out to sea. It'll be relatively rare that your fixed time and your waypoint time will line up exactly. So you usually have to do that extra step of figuring out, okay, this is my fix, I need to transit to the waypoint, and then compare my waypoint time to the time that I will arrive at my waypoint if I went our PIM speed.